Alright, today we're taking a look at Canon's 55 through 250 EFS IS lens. Now this is one of Canon's absolute cheapest telephoto zooms. Now a lot of people consider this to be essentially an extension of Canon's 18 through 55 millimeter kit lens. And what I mean by that is a lot of people think of this as not really being any better than that lens, just having, different focal lengths. Now, is that true? Is this really nothing but an extension for your kit lens, or is this really a new experience? Now, to start off, just feeling the lens, it does genuinely feel a bit stronger and a bit sturdier in the hand than the 18 through 55. And I understand it is going to be bigger, it is a bigger lens. It definitely feels a bit stronger and sturdier in the hand than the 18 through 55, which is definitely a good thing. A lot of people complain about, the weight of a lens, but I feel like this is definitely not too heavy, and it definitely feels a lot more sturdy than the often criticized 18 through 55. Now, another advantage of this lens physically over the 18 through 55 is it does have a dedicated manual focus ring, whereas on the 18 through 55 you actually had to handle the front element. And it worked pretty well, to be honest, but the problem with the one on the 18 through 55 was you were much more likely to touch the actual glass of the lens itself. Whereas on this, you do have the ring, and don't get me wrong, it's not nearly as good as the focus ring on some of Canon's higher end lenses, but it's definitely better to have it than to not have it at all. As you see, this is set to manual focus, and it does make sound manually focusing. So if you're someone that's going to be doing videography, I really can't recommend this lens too much, because on autofocus or manual focus, you'll be hearing the sound of the lens, which is definitely a negative. Now, Canon have actually updated this lens with the STM version, which of course has silent and much faster focusing. So if you're someone who's into autofocus or going to be using videography with this lens, that's definitely something you would take into consideration. But if you're just going to be doing photography, then it makes more sense to save a little bit of money and stick with just the standard IS or IS2 versions, which, if you didn't know, are the same exact lens, except the IS2 is black here, and the IS1, which is what I have, is gray. It really makes no difference. Now, this lens does, of course, have image stabilization, and when you compare this to a lot of Canon's other cheaper telephoto zooms, this is really one of the only ones in the price range. Now, one of the best alternatives to this lens, if you want a cheap telephoto, are some of Canon's older EF telephoto zooms, like the 70 through 210 or whatever, and of course, those older lenses don't have IS. That is definitely one of the reasons why you might want to get this lens over one of those. Now, you probably can't tell from the sample shots I've been showing, but the image quality is actually a teeny bit better than on the 18 to 55. That's just what I find, but I find it's giving me just a slightly better looking image with this lens. So it's definitely not entirely just, an extension of the 18 to 55. It is definitely its own lens with its own advantages and its own disadvantages. Now, aside from just straight up not having the wide angle capabilities, the only disadvantage of this lens over the 18 through 55, of course, is that it doesn't really work well as a macro lens. Now, if you didn't realize, the 18 through 55 can actually focus, impressively closely for such a cheap lens. And of course, this lens can't. You definitely have to be a pretty significant distance away from your subject to focus on it. So if you're someone who's into the ability to have some macro capabilities, this definitely can't satisfy. Now, for me, the reason I got this as the first lens I bought aside from my kit lens was not because it had better image quality or anything like that. It was because I just wanted to cover all the focal lengths I needed. And if what you want is a telephoto zoom that really won't compromise any of the image quality from your kit lens, this is definitely a great choice.